Right. The Wildlife and Bee Protection Foundation brings you the fourth talk of the series, Conservation of Forests, Environment, Wildlife, and Allied Natural Resources. The honorable speaker today is Dr. V B Mathur, formerly from the Indian Forest Service and currently the Chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority of India. He would be sharing his valuable experience on biodiversity conservation and global perspectives. Dr. Mathur, after serving for 33 years at the prestigious Wildlife Institute of India, including as the Dean and the Director of the Institute, was appointed by the Government of India as a full-time Chairperson of the National Biodiversity Authority of India in September 2019. He topped the master's degree in Zoology from the University of Rajasthan in 1981 and obtained a doctorate degree in Wildlife Ecology from the University of Oxford. He joined the Indian Forest Service in 1983 and taught the in-service professional training course at the Indira Gandhi National Forest Sector and the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy of Administration, Mussoorie. Dr. Mathur has been actively contributing on the research policy interface. He is currently the UN Conservation on Biodiversity Bureau member and Bureau member, United Nations Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Dr. Mathur is spearheading India's initiative and he represents the Asia Pacific region. Dr. Mathur is spearheading India's initiatives towards mainstreaming biodiversity in key sectors and policy initiatives. Welcome, sir, for joining this platform of ours, and welcome all the attendees who have logged in for this prestigious session. Now, I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Mathur, and we would like to hear from you, sir. Welcome again.
Thank you very much. I'll take a minute or so to put up my slide. Just bear with me. Let me see how we do that. Give me 1 minute. Okay. Let me. How do I share my screen? I don't see this Shivaji screen share button.
It will be on the top, sir.
Huh?
Left top corner.
Let me see. Okay. Now I see the screen share. I go to entire screen. I say share.
Click presentation.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I would be. And can you please mute your mic so that it doesn't echo? And we will unmute it when the Q&A starts. And I must say that Saturday afternoon is not the right time to hear and talk about biodiversity conservation. It is for seeing movies and entertaining. But in the COVID times, when we are all stuck in our homes, I thought it will be a good idea to talk about some issues at the global level and look at what kind of challenges and opportunities do we now face. And this morning only I changed some of my slides and the thrust of this presentation because I thought that no discussion today on conservation can take place without a reference to COVID, where we are all in, and these webinar series are also prompted in some ways because of the current COVID crisis. So I have divided my presentation in 4 parts, talking about the big picture on biodiversity, and then coming to the issue of pandemic, and then share with you and this group about a concept which many of you know, but I would be explaining that what needs to be done about One Health approach as we talk about dealing with the pandemic, and then we see where do we go from here. Now, everybody understands and knows the acronym called IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Platform on Climate Change. And it has been in existence for more than 20 years. And almost everyone, and when I say everyone, I am now referring to the politicians and the top decision makers, is now knowing that if there is a rise in temperature, then things are going to change. The ecology is going to change, the economy is going to change, and so many things at the global level are going to change because of this 1 to 2 degree rise in global temperatures. But our biodiversity community, to which we all belong, we have not done anything spectacular to that way that people understand that if we don't conserve biological diversity, if we don't protect biological diversity, then this thing or that thing is going to happen. Meaning thereby that we have not been able to communicate to people that why conservation is important and what is going to happen if our efforts to biological diversity conservation do not succeed. So in this context, about 10 years back, or maybe 12 years back, 4 UN organizations, the UNDP, the UNEP, the UNESCO, and FAO, they came together and they set up an entity which is called as I.F.S or IPBES, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So this platform, which brings the best of scientists from all over the world, including India, and it is headquartered in Bonn in Germany. It undertook last year an assessment. It's called as the I.F.S Global Assessment on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And I'm going to share some of the findings from this assessment because these are very germane to our effort for conservation. So they put up a big team together, both men and women, natural scientists, social scientists, multidisciplinary experts. And these people, they put up 156,000 hours of voluntary effort. And these scientists were from 51 countries, including 4 from India, who contributed in this assessment. And what I'm going to share from with you now are some of the findings of this assessment, which become very important to understand the global picture of biodiversity conservation. Now, I draw your attention to the slide where it says that nature underpins and sustains human quality of life. And this bowl of soil that you see in front of you with an earthworm on top very clearly says that how important the soil is. When we talk of conservation, everybody understands flora, everybody understands fauna, but drawing attention to the role of soil is also something very important because without this productive soil, no agriculture biodiversity can happen, no forest biodiversity can happen, and no food security can happen. And I must say some very interesting things at this point, that a few months back, I had a chance to give a presentation before one of the top bureaucrats in the country. And the moment I showed this picture of soil, his immediate reaction was that what is soil to do with conservation? And why are you, Dr. Mathur, so much concerned about soil? So I took time to explain that what is the relationship and how flora and fauna and microorganisms are interconnected. And then if you look at my current dispensation with the National Biological Diversity, where I talk about the biological resources. So biological resources are very clearly defined that they are parts of flora, parts of fauna, and also the microorganisms thereof. So that is what the importance begins, that if we talk of human quality of life, then we will have to make sure that all the components that we talk of, not just flora and fauna, but also of the soil or the subsoil, which in many cases you don't even see, it's below ground, but is very, very important for conservation. And then this assessment which I'm talking about has also given rise to a new terminology, which is called as nature's contribution to people. Now, this nature's contribution to people, as I will just explain, these contributions are getting lower and lower, are getting deteriorated, are getting degraded, and therefore it is a matter of concern. And please see the left-hand side of the slide, 18 items are mentioned. These 18 items, they reflect what is nature contributing to people. If we are talking of human well-being, then human well-being is affected by pollination and dispersal of seeds, air quality, regulation of climate, regulation of fresh water, regulation of soils, and so on and so forth, about medicinal plants. And on your right are the trends. And these trends, as you can see, are from 1970. So we are now in 2020. We now have a 50-year-old trend. It's not just 1, 2, 3 years. We are now talking a synthesis of what has happened in the last 50 years. Now, when I talk of trend, only 3 things can happen. A thing can increase, a thing can decrease, or a thing can remain the same. And that is where I want to draw your attention to these arrows which are pointing downwards, pollination and dispersal of seeds going downwards, habitat creation and maintenance going downwards, the regulation of organisms, the materials, the medicinal plants, all these things they're going downwards. And then some are again going downward, but not at that speed. And there are only a few things which are going either the same or increasing. And if you look at the extreme right, the evidence is also saying this UN assessment was done in 5 UN regions. The entire world is divided into 5, and we are with 52 other countries in the Asia-Pacific region. And as you can see, some trends are consistent. And still consistent would mean that they are decreasing in all 5 regions. And in some, it is called variable. So in some areas, they are increasing, some areas, they are decreasing, and so on. So the point I'm making is that these 18 features or attributes which are determining the nature's contribution, they are showing different levels of change, different levels of decline, and therefore this is a cause of worry. And everything is very nicely summed up in this diagram. It talks of fabric of life. We understand what the fabric of life is, but this fabric is deteriorating worldwide. And see what is our response, as we would do in our normal life. If a piece of cloth or our trousers or pants or shirts, they get torn, we very quickly try to stitch them together. But everybody knows what is the value of such an effort and how long can it last. So this is the kind of a picture which paints that the fabric of life is deteriorating, and the fabric is getting smaller, it is getting thinner, and all indicators of the global state of nature are on decline. So this is one single graph which I have shown, explains to it that what are we doing to Mother Nature, what is happening to the condition of our environment, of our nature, and to some extent we will be able to hold on, but it is a matter of anybody's guess that this thing is not going to last if we continue with business as usual. And therefore, the same scientific report is saying that 75% of the land area has already been significantly altered. 66% of the ocean area is facing cumulative effects. And wetlands, which are so crucial for our life, 85% of them have been lost or they have been degraded. So this is the kind of a situation which we face, and entire humanity and entire natural systems have been deeply reconfigured by people. People like you and me and everyone else are part of these processes, and we have not taken enough care, and therefore this huge amount of alteration is taking place in all kinds of landscapes. Now, this is again a very important graphic I want to share with you on the risk of extinction. Extinction, everybody knows, is a natural phenomena, and species do get extinct with a period of passage of time. But those naturally induced extinctions are different than what we are now talking of, the human-induced extinction rate. And I want to draw your attention to the items which are colored in yellow, in orange, in amber, what we call as different levels of threats: vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered. So this is the kind of a situation where we are in, and this is the risk of extinction cuts across various taxonomic groups. It could be bony fishes, it could be dragonflies, it could be ferns, it could be crustaceans, it could be dicots, it could be cycads. So a range of taxonomic groups have been studied, and the graphic is clearly saying that what percentage of this taxonomic group is threatened, and that is where we need to take a very conscious call now if we need to move ahead. I mentioned about the background extinction rates, and I want to draw your attention to this graphic where all taxonomic groups are affected, but top of the line are amphibians, then followed by mammals, followed by birds, reptiles, and fishes. And as you would know, and all my colleagues from Wildlife Institute of India and having a direct interest in wildlife conservation are aware that there are as many as 16 species in the terrestrial world and about 6 species in the marine world which are facing an imminent threat of extinction. And the Wildlife Institute of India, in partnership with our ministry, has taken up an endangered species recovery program. And I would like to definitely share with you one example of the Great Indian Bustard, which, as you know, was distributed till some time back in the state of Gujarat, in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh, in Maharashtra, and in parts of Karnataka. But right now, as I speak, there are just 125 individuals left in the state of Rajasthan. Gujarat has about 10 to 12 individuals, but there is no male GIB over there. So you can understand the population is doomed to extinction. There already are no GIBs in the state of Madhya Pradesh. I am not sure about Maharashtra, but 2 to 4 might be the number in Maharashtra, and so on. So we are now talking of a population which is less than 150 individuals, and this is the global population, because the GIB or the Great Indian Bustard exists only as an endemic species in India. Same is true for if you go to Kashmir, the Hangul, again populations down to less than 150. We look at Manipur bear or the dancing deer of Manipur, same situations are there. So we are now in a situation where some urgent and critical steps are needed. And I would also say, because in this audience, and as we were talking earlier, a large number of people who have spent their lifetime in wildlife conservation, I want to make a point here. If you would recall, when we started 30 years back at WII, we were told that there is an in situ conservation and there is an ex situ conservation. And everybody was understood that what in situ means, what ex situ means over there. But today, the biggest learning for our Great Indian Bustard project in the state of Rajasthan is that we now need to bridge this difference between in situ and ex situ. In fact, as you would have known, and I can share with you that a combination of in situ and ex situ approach, which had never been done at least in our country, is now in play by scientists of Wildlife Ecology of India eggs of GIB have been picked up from the wild. We have set up an incubation center right inside the Thar Desert in the heats of sand dunes and the state of Rajasthan. And eggs have been raised and reared, and chicks have been produced, and these are now being artificially reared in a closed field laboratory, which is set up in an in situ environment. So the point I'm making is that there are situations where the distinction between in situ and ex situ needs to be minimized, or a combination is required, and a lot of scientific, pragmatic, and multidisciplinary approaches are needed now to ensure that this species survives in the wild. It is a very slow breeder, and we have got, I'm very pleased to say that initial successes are there, and all the eggs that were collected and have given rise to chicks, and the chicks are growing up, and a constant monitoring is taking place. So maybe in coming time for certain species, this kind of an effort would be needed, and that is where we need to prepare ourselves, and that will be the changing dimension of wildlife conservation and management in the country. But coming back to this assessment, which I talked about, it is already saying that up to 1 million species of plants and animals are threatened with the risk of extinction if we continue with the business as usual scenario. So this is again a very, very worrisome finding, that a large number of such species, as I said, of both plants and animals, are threatened with extinction, and we need to change the way in which we look at the conservation of the species. And it is not only the species in the wild. See, these are species of domestic breeds of plants and animals. All these on the right, if you see the domestic breed of cattle, which are so important because these species are locally adapted. Because when we are now talking of climate change is not going to happen in one go. It is going to have a kind of an effect. It will vary across region because local temperatures will change, local moisture regimes will change, the availability of water. Some areas will get dry and some areas will get wet. And these kind of stochastic changes which are going to take place are going to affect these local breeds of cattle. The worry part is that neither the Forest Department nor the Agriculture Animal Husbandry Department is working together to see that what happens to all this domestic variety of plants and animals, and how to prevent their local extinction taking place. So what do we conclude on the basis of this graphics that I showed? I must say that this is the most comprehensive global picture which has been presented by this assessment, which I have put some slides before you. And these trends are definitely worrying. These trends are clearly unsustainable. If we continue with business as usual scenario, we are going to lose peace. So what is the message? Very interestingly, all these assessments, they carry a 20-page summary, which is called as Summary for Policymakers, or SPM. If you type in Google and type I.F.S and type Summary for Policymakers, you will get this document which talks about the trend. So it says very clearly that we need to take action. And that is how it has been worded and mentioned over here. There is a call for action, but a qualification has been made which makes it more important. Then we need to take a prompt action. And again, the prompt action has been further defined, that we need to go further and we need to go faster, because definitely we are kicking and working against the clock, and therefore a faster action is needed. Then we need to take and tackle the root causes of nature's deterioration. What I was trying to explain is what we are trying to do to a species. Yes, actions are needed for certain species, but we need to take cause of the triggers for that. Is it urbanization? Is it agriculture intensification? Is it something else? So unless we tackle the root causes of nature's deterioration, we will not be able to get hold of the situation and take remedial steps. And then two very important things for a large country like India: coordination. This is something which all of us have learned in our working life, that how important is coordination and how weak we are in coordinating. Coordinating within the divisions, coordinating within the wings, and coordinating within departments, coordinating within ministries, and so on and so forth. So this coordination is something which is now required, and integration is again a very, very important word which I want to again highlight from my side. We need integration across sectors. Many times it is happening that we say that this particular thing belongs to Department of Agriculture. This belongs to Animal Husbandry. The roads belong to Ministry of Highways, and the airport definitely belongs to Ministry of Civil Aviation. But yes, these are sectors which are there for governance. But we need to bring about a kind of an integration between the sectors, and very importantly for a country like India, the scale become important. Because what we can do at a panchayat level, we cannot do it at a district level. And what we can do at a district level, we cannot do it at a state level. And what we can do at a state level, we cannot do it at a country level. So these are certain things which I may be stressing the obvious, but I want to make it a point that these kind of things are what is required: a coordinated action, an integrated action. It cuts across sectors, it cuts across fields. Because if we continue to remain in our silos, which is what is the default and most favored action, then I'm afraid we are going to see very large number of species getting extinct, and this nature's contribution and the fabric of life that I showed to you will get further depleted and destroyed. Now, coming back to this current situation of pandemic, I'm sure you are aware of the reasons, but I would like to quickly catch and explain that what is this interconnectedness that I am talking about. And obviously, the step number one is deforestation. And when I talk of deforestation, again, we need to compare ourselves with the global level of change. In Brazil, when you talk of deforestation, we are talking of a different thing. We are talking of mafias, timber mafias, and drug mafias, and big-time operations taking place. In our country, fortunately, for the solid background of the Indian Forest Service and the State Forest Service and the framework that we have for forestry, these kind of things are not happening and will not happen as well. But we also give away, we also cut trees for one thing or the other. Sometimes it is aligning for a road or building up for a stadium or something else which takes place. So that is what is setting the trigger that once you do this deforestation, you then change what is happening inside this forest. And then huge amount of threat is there from animal or illegal trade in wildlife. There is no legal trade in wildlife as far as our country is concerned, but definitely there is a huge amount of trade which goes on, the illicit trade. Top of the line, if you see the illegal trades in the world, top of the line, the trade is in illegal arms. All those AK-47 or 57 which are traded, so those are the biggest trade globally in terms of volume, followed very closely by illicit or illegal trade in drugs. All the narcotics that we are now talking of are being traded in high volumes, in high intensity, followed by human trafficking, illegal trade in women, children, and so on and so forth. But following these three illegal trades is the illegal trade in wild animal parts and products and derivatives. And that is where is a cause of worry, that as long as this trade in illegal wildlife species continues, we run into problems for one reason and the other. And the third are the animal markets. I'm sure all of you have followed the Wuhan story in China, that how these wet markets, how these animals which are killed and slaughtered in the wild are brought to these local markets, and somewhere it is their meat, somewhere it is tissue, somewhere it is blood, and all those things getting mixed up and coming in human touch. And that is where has been what is called as the zoonosis, or the spread of the disease from wild animal to humans. And this is what is happening in the case of current corona crisis also. The virus has jumped from one to the other, and once it has jumped and caught on to the humans, the subsequent transmission is taking place from human to human. So this is the kind of a pandemic pathway which has been worked out by scientists, and this is a graphic from the WWF report in 2019, which talks about the way in which the pandemic pathway operates. It makes it very simple to comprehend that how these interrelationships are there and how action is required at different levels. There are different agencies to control deforestation, different ones to control the traffic, and different ones to control the animal markets. And unless we put up an integrated action, we are not going to get hold of the situation. And then going further, this simple graphic, as you see again from this WWF report that I talked about, on your left is an intact forest. And inside the intact forest, all the plants, all the organisms, all the animals, and all the viruses and bacteria, they live. But everything is contained within this intact forest system. And if you turn your attention towards right, what we do, we just align a highway over there. And this highway is aligned because at the other end, we have built up an housing colony, and there is a requirement that this colony and the residents are connected with the rest of the country or the world. And therefore, we have now created a space inside this intact forest. And as you can see, the cycle of jumping from animal to animal has now moved on from animal to animal, definitely is there, but from animals to humans. So these two simple graphics, they explain that what is the cause of this pandemic and what is the kind of dynamics which is operating inside our forest and what needs to be done. Right now we are talking of COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, it is a public health emergency. I understand that. But what is the guarantee that there will be no other pandemic, or this pandemic may not occur or reoccur in different forms? And already if you look at the last 15 to 20 years, we have seen that somewhere it was H1N1, somewhere it was a bird flu, somewhere something else, or SARS. So this is what is going to happen with a regular frequency if we do not take a collective action. So therefore now comes the next part of it, that yes, this pandemic is there, but how to deal with that? And obviously, when I say how to deal with it, there is no one way. Different sectors of governance have to take different steps, and the medical and public health people have to deal differently. The epidemiology and epidemiologists have to deal it differently, and we as ecologists and scientists and biologists also have to deal with separately. So that is where I now want to flag and Savarkar Saab and Suhas Kumar Saab know that it's not today, that we have been talking for last 20 years at least about a One Health approach, a kind of a collaborative approach which helps us to prevent, to prepare, to detect, to respond, to recover what are called as emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases. See these words, because somewhere it is a case of emergence and somewhere it is a case of re-emergence. And the fact is that human health, animal health, and environmental health, all these three things have to be looked and tackled together. And this graphic explains it very clearly that the human health system, the environmental health system, the animal health system, and the infectious diseases, they cut across. In this current COVID pandemic, I've seen that how from wild to domestic to humans to forest, the jumping of the disease or the virus is taking place. And therefore, this One Health approach is saying that we need to look at zoonotic diseases very carefully, There are mind-boggling statistics. Every day, of course, we see on the television itself, we talk of 1 billion human cases for all zoonotic diseases and 1 million deaths already occurring. And this does not talk of the COVID-19. This graphic was prepared earlier. We also now have the domestic livestock, that 1 in 7 livestock in any given year faces the risk of a zoonotic disease. And as I was trying to explain the impact of climate change, we now have a kind of a threshold against malaria and malaria diseases. But if the temperatures are going to increase, then there is a prediction that more than 150 million people every year will run the risk of having malaria and its consequences over there. So this is a very serious issue which we need to deal with. These pathways of transmission have also been worked out. You remember the country going into lockdown because the spread, the containment has to be prevented over there. And therefore, urbanization, the global travel, agriculture intensification are all required to be controlled. What is, I was trying to explain, jumping over. It's called in scientific terms the spillover or the spillback of the diseases which we need to control. So these pathways and transmissions are known, but we need to act. I will interestingly spend 2 more minutes on the curves. And you would recall in our college days, curves meant something else. When anybody talked of curve, our mind was working in some other direction. But here, for the last 6 months, if you look at the public debate has been on flattening the curve. That is the word which since February 2020 we have been talking, and everybody is talking about flattening the curve and looking at the curve by different states and coming to the conclusion that Maharashtra has been able to do it, or Rajasthan has been able to do it, or some other state, or Delhi has not been able to do it. So this is the COVID-19 curve, as you can see, and curve is nothing. It is only telling us about the number of cases in a given day and the ability of the healthcare system to deal with that. So obviously, when the pandemic started in the month of January, February, our public health system was not really prepared or geared to deal with that. There was no way in which we could have handled so many cases. So therefore, we wanted to flatten the curve. We want to delay the onset of curve. And I would say to a very large extent, we have been able to do it. And if you look at the current statistics, except for 10 states or 10 out of 30 states in the country, we have been able to contain the curve and flatten the curve. So we have been able to contain that. But I now want to move from this flattening of curve to another curve. And this is the biodiversity loss curve. And I want to draw your attention to this dark green line, which is an indication that if we do not take immediate steps, if we do not stop the business as usual, then you can see between 2009 and 2050, we are going to get into a situation where we are depleting our natural capital, where we are increasing the biodiversity loss over there. But then there is a lighter green line at the top. This line is indicating that we can change the direction of the curve. See, in the COVID curve, we were talking of flattening, and in this biodiversity loss curve, we want to change the direction. We want to change this direction of moving on the loss trail to a different trail where we do, first of all, we halt the loss, and then we move towards recovery and we move towards actual increase in biodiversity. That's how it will happen. See, this is the big question. Scientists can always say that this is the cause and this is the problem and so on and so forth. But we need to discuss that how will you change the direction of this particular biodiversity loss curve. And for that, I draw your attention to your right. These 9 arrows which have been shown. First arrow is talking about protected areas. All of us and many of us have worked in those areas, and we have Savarkar Sahab and Swat Sahab and my own batchmate and others who are present here, they know the importance of protected areas. So we need to invest in that. See the science of restoration. Again, not very much taken and implemented in this country. So there is a possibility that you can restore the habitat, you can restore the ecosystem, you can restore the wetlands and so on. So we need to invest in restoration. Third item is green infrastructure. All these roads, highways, transmission lines which are now being talked about, you can green them. And this morning a very nice article appeared, and those of you who know about this highway and expressway between Nagpur to Sigri and cutting across the Page Tiger Reserve in Maharashtra and in Madhya Pradesh, they know that by a little effort, you can create a win-win situation. You can create a passage for these wild animals. You can prevent the accident and mortality taking place. And you can also see that the traffic or the development effects are not impaired. So what the message is that we need to invest in natural capital. Do investments. If you don't do, then things are not. And I'm very pleased to say that Maharashtra today is leading the country in investments in natural capital. And I was told by my colleague in WI this morning that as many as 20 more flyovers and underpasses and overpasses are being built. So this kind of investment in natural capital will be needed if you want to create a win-win situation. Innovations in agriculture. See, agriculture is a very, very important area, and agriculture innovations are required because many times the subsidies which are given in agriculture, they work against nature, they work against conservation. So we need to invest in that. We need to have markets and certifications on that. We need to look at reforms in subsidy and a whole range of things which are required, and ecology and economics need to go together. And finally, if you see at the top, we need better models for governance. We need better models for regulation, because it is not just action in one sector which is going to help us. This graphic is very clearly saying that if we need to change or move the direction, we need to invest and we need to work in different sectors, and we need to see that whatever policy level changes are needed, whatever practice level changes are needed, we are able to do that. So with this in mind, the last thing I want to share with you, and this is again should be a music to the ears of the entire biodiversity community. Our government has realized that going in a mission mode is something which can help the country. So already there are missions which are working. People know the National Mission of Clean Ganga or the National Mission on Forestry and so on. But for the first time, the government is now thinking of launching a national mission on biodiversity and human well-being. So we have been working, the Ministry of Environment and Forest is the agency which will anchor this, and the National Biodiversity Authority has been identified as the mission implementer and the leader. And this mission is a 5-year mission which talks about different aspects of conservation and talking about the science of biological diversity and what more steps are needed. So every aspect of it, whether it is biodiversity and agriculture or biodiversity and bioeconomy, and the most important part which I want to share with you, that there is a big component of One Health. The One Health which I talked about, and this component was framed when COVID effects were not even known. So this is what is the thinking of a group of scientists all over the country have got together, and they have made a component of One Health under this mission. And this mission is currently delayed also because of COVID. But next year or middle of next year, we should be able to do that. And finally, coming to the takeaways from what I have been saying for the last 30 minutes, that we need to maintain the integrity of the natural system. Because that is one thing that if we don't maintain or are not able to maintain the integrity, then we run into huge problems. We need to take immediate steps to bend the biodiversity loss curve. See, I again repeat, in case of COVID-19, we were talking of flattening the curve. But here, the curve is there, but we need to bend it. We have to take it in a different direction. And obviously, as presently our actions are geared towards the pandemic, the One Health approach will be very, very important. And this graphic on your right shows the One Health triad, where healthy environment, healthy animals, and healthy people can live together. And finally, I want to leave it with a quote from Roosevelt, which says that out of every crisis, every tribulation, every disaster, mankind rises with some share of greater knowledge and higher decency of purer purposes. So this is what Roosevelt said in 1932, but it is very much relevant. And finally, I want to show this graphic. See, somebody asked me a few weeks back that what is the most important danger? Is it COVID-19? Is it recession? Is it climate change? Or the collapse of biodiversity? And I was thinking over this and I came across of this cartoon or whatever this depiction which you see. So yes, right now we do think that COVID-19 is important, but COVID-19, as you know, already is sending the economies of the world into recession, into economic recession, which we will have to get over by finding out different packages and stimuluses. And as we prepare these stimuluses, we have to be very careful that we should not create further loss to biological diversity or biodiversity, as we say that. And obviously, climate change will continue to have impacts on all the things that you and I do. And as some scientists are saying that we are currently into what is called as a biodiversity crisis or a biodiversity collapse. So we do have a big danger before us. And therefore, we need to seek help of everyone, whether a policymaker or a decision maker or a scientist or an NGO. And I understand that in our audience today, we have different people who represent different walks of life, but we need to come together. We need to have an integrated approach. We need to have a kind of ability to upscale our effort, and then only we would be able to meet the dangers. Otherwise, one or the other danger, and these are not exclusive of each other. Climate change will continue to impact, recession will continue to impact, and obviously the biodiversity crisis and the collapse is waiting to happen. So with these words, I will stop here, and I will give it back to Shivaji to continue with that. So over to you, back to you, Shivaji.
So with your permission, I would take up some, I would request Mr. Umesh to take up some questions and put them across to Dr. Mathur.
Yes. Thank you.
And we'll be very thankful, sir, if you could answer these questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Mathur, sir. The first question comes from Mr. Purushottam Kale. He's saying habitat conservation is important and the conservation of specific species is secondary. So what efforts are being made to conserve the endemic cattle breed as well as to conserve the habitats?
See, that is a very important point you have made, that conservation of both species and habitat is important. And obviously, as a scientist, I will say that the habitats need to be protected first. But at the same time, there are certain species. I gave you the example of GIB, where you definitely do habitat conservation, but you will have to take steps for that particular species. And in case of these domestic species, we do have the big Ministry of Agriculture, we have the big IARI and their bureaus. And we are now in my new role in the Biodiversity Authority. We have opened up a dialogue, and we are now, only yesterday we had a meeting with them to say that can you give us a list of species which need urgent attention. See, and inventarization is the first step before conservation. So what you are saying is correct. We need to work parallelly. Wherever habitat conservation is required, we do that. But certain species will require immediate steps. So we need to open up our action on both.
Thank you, sir. And another question from Mr. Purushottam Kale. This is about quality of soil is going down everywhere. Are there any special efforts being made to conserve the soil?
See, you are aware our Prime Minister's program of the soil health cards. See, for every action to take place, the first requirement is the sensitization. Even in this group of people who are attending this webinar today, we must ask ourselves that how many of us are truly sensitive to the role of soil? Because see, that is where the action will take place. If you and I get convinced, and I gave you that example, I got a shock of my life when the senior officer said, "Why are you concerned, Dr. Mathur, with soil?" And I actually had no answer. Then I went back and I created this slide which you see. And that is my number one slide where I say that this is what is the actual, a small bowl of soil, but is so important for conservation. So yes, soil investment in soil health is required. Soil health cards are being made. And we now need to work with our district when we talk of our biological diversity registers, when we are talking of our PBRs, we are now making sure that, and I would, as you both of you were mentioning that you are making PBRs, make sure that the health card of that particular village or the Gram Panchayat where you are making that PBR is reflected, so that we know in 2019 or 2020 what is the status of soil over there. Is it decreasing or depleting or changing? And then only we will be able to take a corrective step.
Thank you, sir. Another question from him is very interesting. Viruses are passing from man to other animals, even tiger, which is worrisome. Are the concerns being brought to forefront in veterinary practitioners?
I would say yes, and see, that was the reason I must say to Shivaji that I changed my presentation this morning to bring in this One Health approach. See, this One Health approach is very clearly saying that as human health is not secured, if I do not secure the wild animal health, if I do not secure the domestic animal health. So this is a very clear indication that we need to have these interrelationships where we should be able to come up with a cohesive action where all the healths are important and we call them as one health only.
Thank you, sir. One question from Mr. Jarnil Singh, sir. What, in your opinion, role of Corona to restore fabric of life? Adversities does have significant learning points for humanity to remain in limits.
See, again, a very, very nice and a philosophical question. Yes, one needs to look at both the sides. There are some positive elements. And if I were to say positive elements, see, I'm sure all of you have seen the pictures of wild animals on the road. Somewhere there were elephants, somewhere there were deer, somewhere there were leopards, somewhere there was the civet cat. And what went into the minds of people that left to nature, the nature will recover.
Yes.
But that is philosophical. In real sense, it may not happen, it might require more effort. But I must say, the sensitization towards nature and the effect that if you don't do and if you continue to mess with nature, then not only this pandemic, but many other pandemics are going to come. I'm sure that message has gone across to many. Now, whether that message translates into action is to be seen.
Thank you, sir. One question from Mr. Anil Bharadwaj, sir. You repeatedly talked about the coordination between different departments. Now, with your current position and looking at wider picture, how easy or difficult is this coordination? Also, what need to be taken to be done for bringing all players together?
See, you know as much as I do that this is the most difficult thing. We are not able to talk within our own department. Forget about going to outside the department. But believe me, in my 9 months of stay at Chennai in the authority, the only thing I have done is to go across different departments. And agriculture today is my most important department, followed by animal husbandry, followed by irrigation, and so on and so forth. It will happen. See, interestingly, because on the other side also is human being only, persons like you and me. If I am looking at the authority, there is other who is looking at something else. Only thing is we are not talking. So, if we take this effort and decide that we will go and talk to these people, I must share with you, 3 years back, we did a small project in WII to find out how many ministries in the government of India are there which are working for biodiversity conservation. Yes. We sent our team, we looked at their website, we looked at all possible manner, and we realized that there are as many as 24 ministries. Now what happens? We send our team, and Bhargava, I am talking of the biofilm project. So we sent our team to that, and when our person was talking to agriculture, they said, we have nothing. The Ministry of Tribal Affairs Joint Secretary wrote that we have nothing to do with biological diversity. See, I have this, Savarkar Sahab might feel amused that this guy has given in writing the Joint Secretary saying that we have nothing to do. Half of the people were saying, we have no money. We told them that we have not come for your money. We just want to know, because we understand your scheme of organic agriculture is very, very important for forestry. So, we just want to know, can you upscale your scheme? And sir, today I must share with you, if we are able to make change in one scheme of the government, which is the Manrega. See, the amount of investment in Manrega is to the tune of 1 lakh crore. I promise that I can't even write those number of zeros which happen in 1 lakh crore. And they have a component on afforestation. And if we can work with them and request them that this is where you need to, and our forest department colleagues are able to provide that help. And when we are talking of afforestation, if we can convert them into medicinal plant conservation, it will be a win-win for the local community. And you can see, sir, the last minute action, our government, the present government really has given up economic packages. And in one package, our Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has included 5,000 crores in Manrega for medicinal plant cultivation along the Ganga states. And Bhargava sir, WI needs to play an important role in that too. So what I'm trying to say, that the same governance, if we are able to talk, then we are able to unlock. If we don't talk, we will never be able to unlock, and our ministry will never have funds for anything worthwhile, if I can say that.
Thank you, sir. Another question is coming from Mr. Jarnail Singh, sir. What is the success rate of in situ and ex situ conservation of endangered species? If not significant, what is the way ahead?
Sir, it is too early. Too early for me to talk about success rates. I was trying to hint at a point that all our hardcore managers are trained for in situ conservation. And the second category of our managers then go to ex situ conservation. But here is an example of the species that I talked about, where combination of both in situ and ex situ will be needed. So it is a long way. See, in case of bustard, I must share with you that myself and Dr. Jhala, when we went and talked to the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, Madam Vasundhara, and she said that what is the duration of your project? And when we said 30 years, she said, I am not interested. For the simple reason that politicians have a very small lifespan. So she was thinking that, okay, if you need anything for me to do for 3, 4, 5 years, my present tenure, I am for it. But if you talk of 30 years that it will take for bustard population, then she at least in some ways lost her interest. Not that I will still say that according to me, she is one of the better politicians who understands about nature and wildlife. So her understanding was not deficient, but her reaction was that 30 years is a long time for any conservation effort to give results.
Thank you, sir. Archana Bahuguna ma'am has asked one question. There is urgent need to establish wildlife forensic laboratories across India and in other South Asian countries, as well as to close wet markets. In this regard, what step will be taken by NPA and by international agencies?
See, again, Dr. Archana, you have made a very valuable point. We are aware of the importance of wildlife forensics and the role which both your organization, the ZSI and the WII and others have to play. So yes, it is very, very important. The wildlife crime control has to play a very important role. See, what these things do, they now focus the attention. And that is what Janil Singh Saab, the flip of Corona is. That first time the Corona has said that wet market has to be controlled. Believe me, even I had no inkling of how does a wet market operate and how the mixture of blood, of tissue, of meat can help in jumping of the virus from one to the other. So these things are now coming up, and fortunately there is some level of sensitization, but a long way to go, definitely.
Thank you, sir. Another question is coming from Mr. Jai Singh Paryar. Can we identify the actionable items and institutions to work on remedial controlling measures?
I didn't understand your question, but yes, we do have a good idea of all our organizations in different sectors. And again, I must say that 3 years back in a coastal and marine project, Bardasab in WII, when we listed the number of universities and agencies, there are more than 100 agencies and universities which talk and deal only with coastal and marine conservation. Sitting in Dehradun, we had no idea that there could be, we just thought that Anna University and 1, 2, 3, 4 more will be there. But when we commissioned a study, we came to know that there are 105 institutions which the government has set up only for coastal and marine. So for all the areas, whether it is veterinary science or whether it is forestry science or whether it is wildlife science, we do have, but unfortunately we don't talk to each other.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jai Singh Paryar asked questions. Broad gauging of railway line between Nainpur and Balaghat also needs attention to protect the viability of corridor. Hope it has matching priority while project is getting commissioned.
Yes, certainly. And I must share with you that WI has submitted a report. I remember last year when this proposal came up, we did do that. I must share something on the lighter side. And that is my experience with the national agencies, the National Highway Authority of India and the Indian Railways. So see, the very fact that it is NHAI means that integration will be there within the working of this. But believe me when I say what you can do with NHAI Maharashtra, you cannot do with NHAI Madhya Pradesh. And what you can do with NHAI Madhya Pradesh, you can't do it with NHAI Uttarakhand. This has been the biggest learning. And they have the same minister. Everything is same at the top level. But within the systems, we are so tight. Same thing is true with Indian Railways. See, Assam and West Bengal go out of the way to help elephant mortality. But my own state of Uttarakhand, we wanted to give, to take from them old railway lines. See, between, the issue of elephants between in Rajaji National Park and between Haridwar and Dehradun. And our ecologist, our South Indian ecologist, Ajay Desai. See, Ajay Desai said that, sir, आप हमको पुराना रेलवे की जो रेलवे लाइन की वो जो पटरी है, वो पटरी दिलवा दीजिए. That we want to put it as a barrier. And when we requested railways to do that, they said 10 crore rupees laiye. So see, this is what happens, that our own agencies within government, they work differently. And if we sometimes get a champion, then that champion can work wonders within the same frame of law.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vijay Elorkar, he has asked some interesting questions because it is related with wildlife and conflict and man-animal conflict. Man-animal conflict, especially on fringes, made agriculture difficult. How can we control this?
Sir, there is no straight answer. We need to look at many things. We need to look at the cropping pattern. We need to look at the type of crop that you can grow. And we need to work with the farmer. Because we know that all wild animals, they have preference for certain crops. And they also have a dislike for certain crops. And if we can work, and some good studies coming up from your own state of Maharashtra, in case of elephants, in case of use of pepper and use of other things. So there are some cosmetic solutions, but overall it will be very difficult as the number of blue bull or nilgai rise. It will be very difficult, or the wild pigs rise. It will be very difficult to control. We need to look at some very drastic measures to deal with that.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Santosh Singh, sir, is giving compliments to you, well presented. Then he asks one question. Do you agree that Corona halted our disaster speed of development and give a chance not to crash and think corrective measures for the maintenance of our climate and environmental health?
I've not got the question. Can you ask him to speak his question? That might be better if he can come in.
SP Singh, sir.
Thank you, SP Singh is
question clear बताओ.
क्वेश्चन ये है भैया, आप जिस स्पीड से आप डेवलपमेंट कर रहे थे और उससे ऐसा लग रहा था कि ट्रेन जाके क्रैश हो जाएगी. The way the climate change is changing, and these are the disasters. Or this corona has given a thought, could able to stop this train and avoid our crash, and think that how should we go about the development so that we can able to survive our generations. Otherwise, we will all face this kind of tragedies are happening. समझ पाए नहीं मैंने कह सकता.
Hey, I get your point. See, you are talking of a larger philosophical question, but you see my last graphic, because we are definitely under economic recession. See, this big country of ours cannot continue in economic recession. We need to break that. But the worry part is that while breaking the economic recession, we should not do something to further harm the environment. Already the corona came because we did not care about the environment. Now we are trying to look at cure, and the cure might be worse than the disease. So this is what is the message, that we have to be extremely careful. And all this economic stimulus packages that we are talking. See, very recently I must say that I did study some 200 economic stimulus package all over the world. And accepting 5 packages, none of them talk about ecology. None of them talk about environment. So yes, you are right. As we try to recover from this recession, we will be doing more harm to our environment. Yes, it will happen.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. I just want to give an attention that simply by increasing the temperature less than 1, that we are seeing the kind of disasters happening. So we have to take care of the climate, environment for the proper progress. That's what I want to say. Thank you, Mathur Sahab. Nice presentation. Wonderful.
Thank you, sir. Sir, another question comes from Ms. Shraddha Ghai. How do we sensitize our politicians or governing officials who are not aware of wildlife and biodiversity conservation?
You have to come back to Shivaji Chauhan and ask him to organize more webinars and make sure that they attend it.
Yes.
I'm sure that the effort that I have made in the last 45 minutes will rub some conservation on them also.
Definitely, sir. Definitely. And another last question comes from Shraddha Gai only. How do we conserve biodiversity in urban areas to reduce pollution and conserve water bodies? Also, please throw some light on grassland conservation in wildlife areas or national parks.
See, your questions are for my wildlife management class, but still I will try to answer them. That urban biodiversity is also a neglected area. I must say that. But now we are turning our attention. From where? Because I want you to draw your attention towards the Smart Cities program. How can you have a smart city without taking care of nature? This is the question we are asking to Ministry of Urban Development. That you want a smart city in Pune, you want a smart city in Jaipur, you want a smart city everywhere, but you don't want to invest in trees, in birds, in butterflies, in urban parks. So we have to come and tell them. And interestingly, General Singh sir, the corridor concept, I went recently, about 6 months back to Singapore. Singapore is now making parks for connecting the butterflies within the city of Singapore to move from one park to the other. Imagine the kind of sensitization which they are having. And here we are now, I come back to my own city of Dehradun, where there were 2 canals over there. The East Canal, if you recall, we have buried those canals. So we have now taken away the remaining water body which was there in our system. And therefore, if you saw in this current monsoon, and Bharadwaj sir will bail me out, what was the flooding which took place in Dehradun this year? Because our own natural systems which were there. So, yes, again, sensitizing our urban planners that they need to do much more. And coming to your last part, grasslands are the most important thing. Swaz Sahib is sitting over there. 20 years back, he was talking about maintaining of grasslands in Paints Tiger Reserve. And when very few people, in his own management plan, he said that we have to write prescriptions to manage these grasslands which are there. So yes, they are very, very important and we need to maintain and conserve them.
Thank you, sir. One more question from Danny Dotekar. In a biodiversity, how the keystone species play the important role in regulating or preservation of other species in tropical cascade?
See, again, you have to come to WI and attend the course. But see, while all species are important, certain species have a dominant role. What we call in very simple terms an umbrella species. You understand what is an umbrella? What an umbrella does? It tries to protect all the species which come under that. So while we need to have plans for every species, but if you protect the major ones, for example, if in any forest you can protect or conserve the elephant or the tiger, all the species down the line, they get protected. So that is the concept in which we operate through keystone and whatever else you call them. But the idea is that it brings focused attention to certain species.
Thank you, sir. One more question from Mr. Gurbaz Singh, sir. Why there is a lack of coordination between forest department and universities? Due to ego problem, foresters consider themselves as gods or bureaucrats, and university professors are highly intellects, and this barrier is not broken. That's why very few efforts mature.
Sir, you have yourself given the answer. I don't have to say anything on that. And obviously, sir, it is everywhere, it is the ego. It is the ego which is preventing all the coordination, all the cooperation, all the convergence that I am talking about. And definitely, we need to work. And I must again, since I see a lot of officers from Maharashtra, see, we were looking at these PBRs. And it is only in the state of Maharashtra where they've issued a circular that all NCC and NSS students can take part in the preparation of PBR. And that will be treated as their activity under which the NCC and NSS work. So definitely, see, we would not have been able to join forest service if we had not gone to a university. So that is a simple answer to me, that we came because we are today because we had an opportunity to go to the university. So why should we shun our professors and so on and so forth? So yes, we need to definitely take help and invite them. And all our colleagues who have opportunity of working as managers, if you can help the local university and local college and allow their students to visit your park, it will go a long way.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And now hand the session over to Dr. Shivaji for wrapping up the session. Shivaji, please.
Well, sir, I must say that we would have had nothing better than this on biodiversity. And the way the issue was covered from the very local level to the global level was a sort of what you call a feature film packed up in one session. And session was very interactive. And apart from that, the most important point was that the current perspective of the pandemic was shown closely knit with the problem we are facing about biodiversity conservation. And we are really very thankful to you, sir. As I said, that it would have been nothing better than this. And I also thank all the people who have logged in, all the guests who have logged in and made this session successful. And I thank Dr. Mathur and all the attendees. I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Umesh to do the formal vote of thanks and then thereafter we close this session.
Thank you, Dr. Shivaji. Thank you so much, sir, Mathur sir, because after so many days, I am just listening to you and your lecture. It is just honey in my ears. And thank you so much on behalf of Wildlife and Bee Protection Foundation and on my personal behalf. I thank you for delivering such an innovative and it's crispy lecture for us, because it is really nurturing to our minds, and it is fuel for our working further in the depth of conservation, biodiversity conservation. Thank you so much. And
sir. I would also like to intervene and thank Mr. Savarkar, who is guru for all of us.
Yes, and I want to thank a lot of my senior officers and then my friends and my lot of colleagues. They are attending the session. Thank you so much for attending the session. Thank you, Savarkar sir. Thank you, Jarnail Singh sir. Thank you, Anil Bharadwaj sir, and everybody who has attended the session. Thank you so much, and keep in touch with us, because every Sunday we will be just holding such lectures to edify everybody, so that the conservation flag of conservation should go on and on. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mathur sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you.